Boardroom Bound, Episode 27, The Key to Personal Branding with Ian Moyse.
Being able to control your brand. It's about putting the right type of content out there and thinking about what you're doing.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Boardroom Bound. My name is Alexander Lowry, and this is the podcast dedicated to intentional leadership in the boardroom. My goal is to give new and aspiring directors the tips, tactics, and strategies necessary to transform your confidence and build a successful career as a board director. Quick reminder that you can get all of today's show notes at podcast.gordon.edu. And today I'm thrilled to share that we have been nominated for the 14th Annual People's Choice Podcast Awards. It's so hard for me to fathom that way back in February, we started with a very simple goal of helping new and aspiring directors to bring their best selves to the boardroom. And it's been fun to watch the show grow and get a worldwide following. And now to see that we've been nominated for an award, and not just any award. The business category has had some phenomenal winners. Freakonomics has won it. NPR's Planet Money podcast has won it 3 times. And to think that we're being considered along those lines is really just tickles me and gives me a big smile. And if people would like to go vote for us, that happens during the entire month of July over at podcastawards.com. In the business category, you can submit the Boardroom Bound show. And of course, it helps us immensely if you want to share the news about that on your social media, because our goal is very simple. We would like to have more people aware of this podcast as we're growing and developing in our early years, simply so that we can share more good news with others. We bring this to you every week because we're thrilled to be participating in your growth and development. And I see this as a great way for other people to see it as well. And I think it's also great fun. Delighted to be a recipient. It's always an honor to be nominated. That's the way everyone talks about it, and I do feel that way. So voting happens during the whole month of July, and I hope you'll participate in that. In today's episode, we'll be speaking with Ian Moyse. He has been a sales leader over 25 years. He's now the EMEA director for Salesforce cloud telephony provider Natterbox, and sits as a non-executive director for firms such as Zash, Cranford Group, Digital Leadership Associates, and Assure Data. He's also a non-exec for industry bodies FAST and the Cloud Industry Forum. Now, in today's episode, Ian's going to be talking not only about the technology stuff, but really about the branding that prepared him and got him there. He spends incredible time thinking about personal branding. He's an expert on the subject, and he's going to share with us lots of tools, tips, tactics, and strategies for how all of us can grow and develop into a position of authority, and it becomes like a snowball rolling downhill where you pick up information and data and SEO searches, and all of it starts coming together and pointing back to you. And that's relevant for all of us because to get a seat on a board, you don't be a generalist. You need to have someone with authority, a particular niche that you are focused on. Ian has lots of ideas about how we can all do that, using his own story as a great example. For example, one of my favorite tips that we're going to learn today is the 4-1-1 rule. So think about using social media to build up your authority on a topic. You're going to do about 4 pieces that give your audience knowledge and information, inform them on the topic they follow you for. And within that, then you have another piece that you can do that's lighthearted or personal, perhaps about your family. And then you get one piece that's promotional, whether it's what you're selling or sharing or what you're trying to do. Keeping to that formula gives everyone the same amount of information that's exciting about you and keeps them coming back, while also informing them about who you are and what you're doing. Ian's got wonderful tactics and strategies for us today. Let's jump into the show. Ian Moyse, welcome to the Boardroom Bound podcast.
Alexander, thank you, and good to have the opportunity to speak to you and your audience.
Well, we're delighted to have you today, and we were talking about it offline before we began. I think this is going to be a wonderful case study. It sounds weird to say it about yourself, but it'll be a case study about yourself in multiple ways, because you're someone who's got, being over on the other side of the pond, we call them NED roles, non-executive directors. You've got multiple NEDs on the for-profit, on the nonprofit, but you're also what I would call an expert in personal branding. So it'll be very interesting to talk about something that we all need to be hearing about on this show, is our branding and how we develop that and turn that into our networking, and how you've gone about that and doing that. We can build it in such that way, if that's not too uncomfortable for you.
Sure, no, happy to do that, and it's an experience I've lived, right? And I didn't. It's a good one because I didn't choose. I didn't know about personal branding or social selling, which led me to the branding component. I fell into it by accident of trying to do my day job. and trying to just get on with things in the world that we now live in, which is changing and continues to change, driven by technology.
Well, why don't we start there? So before you got your first Ned role, and maybe that just sort of happened and you weren't thinking about your branding, were you beginning to consider your branding and development in order to position yourself for that first role?
So it really came about, as I say, because of social selling, running sales teams and trying to get into new prospective accounts, leads, pipe. The challenge everyone has today is it's not easy, and it's getting harder and harder because the buyer, which is all of us, has changed. We've all become more smarter. We've all got Google at our fingertips. We all do our own research about anything, whether it's a product, a service, a movie, an app, a person. It's all at your fingertips. So it was becoming harder. So I started to try and figure out, how do I stay relevant? How do I get my sales teams still to be successful? And it wasn't called social selling, but I was trying to figure out these tools. LinkedIn's obviously the one you start with. Actually, you can look people up and try and figure out, oh, they know someone I know. Maybe I can leverage that. So it was using some basic things. And as part of that, the dawning sort of came by accident, again, not under the title personal branding. But if you're going to look at them, they can look at you.
Right.
And they can and people make judgments. We'll make first impressions. So we always talked in sales about first impressions counting, the first couple of minutes of a meeting.
I'm hearing my mother's advice back when I was going to primary school.
So it's nothing new, right? But in today's world, it's typically a digital handshake, because before you go and meet someone, often if you know that interaction's going to take place, they've checked you out electronically. You know, if you're going for an interview, anyone on here that's going for an interview earlier in their career or any type of interview, believe me, someone is checking you out, whether you like it or not. And they're going to make judgments on you of what they see and what you present from the image they see. You know, the old adage that photographs speak 1,000 words. And how you say things and what you say about yourself, they're going to make those judgments, not just from the CV that you'd sent them previously. They're going to correlate the CV with what you've got online. Is there a difference? And I see this often when I look at people, is actually there's a difference here, and it gives me clues of things. There's something not right here.
Well, because you're going to take that first impression, you're either going to accept it or reject it. If you accept it, you continue to validate it. If you're rejecting it, now you're reassessing
Exactly. And you just got to take it that that's the way the world is. You can disagree with it. You can say, I don't like that fact. I want it to be like the old world, but we're never going back. That's the reality. There is more about everyone on the net than there's ever been before. And for millennials and Zeds, it's going to be worse because I see this all the time. People are posting pictures of their kids every 5 seconds. Their whole life is being documented online.
Right.
But they haven't asked the kid yet. So the kid's going to hit 18 and suddenly realize, actually, I didn't want that to happen. I want to remove it. You know, we're living in a totally different society where people can behave differently and get access to things about you that even 10 years ago weren't the case. 20 years ago absolutely weren't the case. So the internet has changed everything. Social media layered on top of it has changed that yet again.
And in many cases, like we're talking about here, that can be a positive, right? You can control that image and that message and use it to advance whatever cause you need.
You need to make that choice of, are you just going to let it happen around you? So I hear some people, right, and they'll talk about, well, I don't have a profile. Doesn't do me any harm. I can't argue either way, but you don't know either. You don't know if it does you harm. Are people looking at it and saying, well, there's no profile? When I look at people in the technology sector, if I'm going to interview someone, they have no profile as a salesperson coming in, immediately they're at the bottom of the list, because it's, for me, then they have not recognized the relevance of being visible on social in a positive manner to their prospective customer, particularly in the technology sector. So the fact you've made that cognizant choice not to be there at all isn't a good thing. That you've neutralized the information that I can get to. You've sent me a different message.
Well, it's interesting because I do think there is some difference between industries. So, for example, when I worked at JP Morgan before this role, one of the senior private bankers and I were talking about LinkedIn. He said, I really barely use it. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I have a profile, but I don't connect with anybody because I'm a quote unquote private banker. If someone wants to connect with me, I will connect with them, but I don't go out. And I thought, I'm not sure I buy that, but I get why you're saying that as a strategy. But for most of us, if you're applying for a C-suite job or a board role, the first thing you do is you're going to either Google someone, or I would just go to LinkedIn LinkedIn directly. I want to see what their profile is. And I think the expectation is if you're at the board level, you are a senior enough, accomplished enough person that you have a history and a track record that you want to share.
Exactly. And people also look at who are you connected with and what content do you share. It gives a profile of who and what you're about. And certainly if you want to build your own personal brand, it has a lot of benefits off of the back of that. And it isn't just about having a profile, it's then how you leverage that profile to what do you want to be known for and how credible do you come across?
It's really fascinating you say that, because earlier today I was on LinkedIn looking up one of our other guests on the show, and they are board all over their LinkedIn profile. And on most people, you will allow people to see other relevant people, and you'll see them in the top right corner of your screen. And you would just see, for this person, other senior board people, because that's the sphere that LinkedIn is placing them in. And to your point of like, I'm now seeing that and thinking like, wow, okay, these people know all these people. That really makes sense. To your point, you're just missing out on that opportunity to make an impression.
Absolutely. And you don't know who's making that choice to look at you, right? It could be, you may not have even applied for a job. It could be, we now see a lot of headhunters, particularly for more senior roles, looking out there. And you can argue, well, I don't want to be on social network, but guess where they're going to look typically? They're going to look on the great internet and look for certain keywords and certain things and see who stands out. Who stands out as a great candidate? I get approached all the time. I'm not on the market. I'm not on any job boards. I'm not looking for a role, but I get approached all the time for roles. Oh, we noticed this about you on social. We noticed an article about you, and then that led to here. They find me.
So in some ways, you're building that brand either intentionally or not for your positioning.
Well, it's become intentional now. And initially it was by accident of just making sure my social profiles looked polished, looked professional, told the right story, gave that good impression of going in the room. You'd always wear the shiny shoes and you'd be prepared and wear your suit. It's do that to your social profiles. That's the basics. So that if someone finds it, at least you're not doing any negative damage.
Right.
You at least appear neutral, if not slightly positive. But now, because I've twigged on to this, I absolutely cultivate this, and it's something you do a little bit of every day, and that can be from writing a blog. It can be from doing something we're doing here, right? Mm-hmm. You'd have checked me out and made a quick decision of, is Ian right to be on our podcast? Does he offer value? Well, how did you get that? Unless you know someone who recommended me, you're going to do a quick online piece and go, what did you find? It's positive, negative, or neutral. And you make a quick decision of in bucket or out bucket. And that's what people are doing, micro decisions every day about everything.
Absolutely. And I would encourage all of our audience I might use the Google tool to look up Ian, but the reality is for people in the business world, board roles, especially say for-profit board companies, LinkedIn is the choice de rigueur, and it's where all the headhunters go. It's where I would say Ian would say the same thing as me. That's just where you go and you look. So if your profile is up, that's a start. But if it's not up to snuff, I would say it's not good enough. That's probably one of the key takeaways from today. Some of the basic things, Ian, you've already talked about, just having that quality headshot. It's having the right headline in the summary. And I know when I did a little LinkedIn stalking of you, I got pages and pages of data. There's so much value in there, right? Some people might be overwhelming, but for others, it allows them just to dig deep and go, I know exactly what he's all about. I can understand his brand.
And that's the key, is if you looked across those and we hadn't spoken or we hadn't seen any bio of me, what are people going to get? Are they going to get some? So I chose, the sector I've worked in for many years and very passionate about is cloud computing, focused on software as a service. From the sales side, it's social selling, not sales leadership. Great, I've done that for 25 years, but that's nothing different. I was early into social selling, so that's it. So I like to be, and anything I talk about and tag into, it's social selling from the sales perspective, and the business side, and the technology side is cloud computing, software as a service. And that's what I want to be seen for. So if people find me and had to make a judgment call of what do you think Ian's known for, they're going to get it sort of right and fall into those buckets, because that's the content they see from me. That's what they see as a theme that comes out from me across my profiles, the content I write and create, the content I share, events I speak at, et cetera, et cetera. So there is some consistency.
So that makes total sense. So let's translate this across for our audience. So what that looks like into pursuing a board role. So let's almost set aside for a moment that you have multiple ones in your profile, because now you've shown you have that experience, but you have this brand recognition. You have this name that someone can find, whether they're a headhunter or a head of a nominating committee. They can come out and find you. How do you go about putting the right spin on it so that you're saying, oh, I'm ready for a board? Let's say you didn't have it yet, but you know you've got this right tool that you want to use. How would you recommend that for our audience in terms of building their brand?
Well, firstly, it's not an immediate thing, right? I always describe it, it's like the stand-up comic that's now got a sitcom, and they appeared overnight, and overnight success, but it hasn't been. They've been touring the clubs for the last 15 years, doing the groundwork. So if you come into this, and then because 3 months later you haven't been offered a non-exec role, you feel you failed, then you set out with the wrong objective. This is about building your brand slowly. It does take time. You may hit a few lucky ones along the way. So let me give you a particular real world example. Mm-hmm. So off the back of cloud in Europe, a great new law came out, GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation. We're going against that, but it's been hyped and
that's why everybody got all of the emails about opting in.
Exactly. So I got involved in that through an old colleague who'd set up a company, and he knew me, so wanted me to be a little bit of a non-exec help with that. So I did that a couple of years ago. Because of that, another company was looking for a speaker. I'd been seen as speaking at events and reached out, saw me in the cloud space. Do you speak on GDPR? We saw something. You'd written this article. Do you speak? Yes. So I did a speaking gig for them. That was it. 18 months later, they reached out to me and asked, do you do non-exec? We've seen you do some non-exec stuff because we follow you now. Can we talk about that? So, one thing led to another, and I've seen this again and again. So, you create your own accidents through social. And it may be speaking at events, podcasts, guest blogging, social influencing, non-exec roles, but you've got to put yourself out there first. And that's what I've done. Through the personal branding, I started write some content, something you know about, give a good opinion piece and put it out there. But don't expect immediately the world becomes a light and you get contacted back. Stick at it. If you look at my LinkedIn, I don't know how many blogs I've done now, but I consistently have written on GDPR. I've got about another 20 blogs in the queue of ideas and things that have struck me through customer experiences I've had dealing with different retailers or vendors. And there's a story there. I can write. I know exactly what to write because it's something that just comes to you through your experience and your expertise. I've got a spin on this that will be interesting for people. By creating good content, you can get that content onto other sites. People like to share good content, etc. So it's effort. But I've had, coming back off of that, guest blogging. So I now guest blog for things like Oracle, SAP, Sage, Equinix. I've just had another couple of vendors approach me cold on Twitter through DM messages. Would you be interested in this sort of thing for us? So increasingly, I get approached now for non-exec roles, for speaking at events. I spoke in Bulgaria last year, of all things, for 2 days, where they flew me out and I did 3 keynote speeches over 2 days. Now, every time you do that, gets you a new potential audience, if you do a good job, of followers, or they'll check you out on social, or they might share your content. I had people reach out from that with, actually, we liked what you said about that, but do you do this? Or do you know someone that does this? It's building your reputation for what you do have expertise and experience in, and you will get approached, but you've got to start somewhere, and it's those building blocks. It's about getting the snowball moving. And once it does, it takes a life of its own. And I've seen it. I've lived it. I didn't set out to do guest blogs for all these big brand names. If someone had said to me, there's your target to go and guest blog for some of these major brands, I wouldn't have known where to start. Who's your reach to? Do you send a cold email to someone saying, do you want a guest blogger?
Yeah, you're going to write Larry Olson at Oracle.
They spotted me. They spotted me, saw what I'd done. And the more you do it, guess what? The more my content gets shared by those vendors, the more someone else spots you and goes, oh, we saw out of interest. You create your own luck. You really do on social.
So on one of our previous episodes, it was number 21 with Matt Craven, we talked a lot about thought leadership to help build your brand. And he talked us through the thought leadership pyramid from his perspective of you're a generalist down at the bottom, and perhaps you go down this path that you're talking about, you beginning to do some of these guest blogs and podcasts around whatever your niche is to build your brand. You eventually become a specialist around it. And as you continue to move up, like you're talking about, more people are coming to you and approaching you, eventually become authority. And just like you said, that snowball is rolling down a hill, it's growing and developing, and now you have your platform and people are reaching out to you, just as they have for you, of saying, you're a specialist, we would like you to talk, or be a Ned or something like that. So now your snowball's rolling down the hill, Ian. So where's it going to go next? How do you envision building this out and continuing to grow your platform?
Well, for me, it's raising up those bars, right, of how far does your content reach? You know, I've got three open invites at the moment to get content. The hardest part for me is writing the good quality content, because some things come easy. You start to write and you just know exactly what you're going to put in, and it runs onto the page. Others can be quite complex, and you really have to put thought into them, and you strain over the writing. I don't find writing particularly easy, but my style is just to write conversationally and put it out there as it is. So I've got 3 great opportunities out there for 3 strong brand areas which want content, but I've got to produce good content for them to cover it. They're not just going to take it because it's from me. So I'm working on that. So for me, it's how do I raise the bar to that next level? And I also always ask when someone takes content, can you link back to me? And I've created specific social links I use, which I measure the SEO on. And the SEO comes from the backlinks, from quality links, so the better I can get my content placed in stronger places, the better those links become to my social profiles, which has a knock-on effect to my social profile being picked up in indexes higher. So if someone searches cloud speaker, I'm going to appear higher in Google because of what I've done. So it's all this domino effect. One thing begats another. So that's what I'm working on. You know, I want to be I'd love to speak at bigger events. So aspirations for me moving forward, where do I take this next was your question. So, you know, for me, it's about getting my content in increasingly valued spaces. So it's great that places like Oracle and SAP take it, but can I get it into Forbes? Can I get it on BBC? Can I get it in more mainstream places, which improves your thought leadership? And where possible, I always ask for backlinks. And backlinks I've created links for my social profiles that are personal branded links. And those are the ones I want people to link to, not link to me on LinkedIn or my Twitter address. Use these personal links, because the SEO then on those is more consistently going up. It's helping my personal searchability and findability. So I want that if someone searches a speaker on cloud, that I'm going to appear on that first page as at least an option for them. Right. Which drives more opportunity back to me for all of these superfluous things, whether it be podcasting, blogging, speaking, non-exec, etc.
So you're being clever about the branding and building and the reputation. This is great in terms of success stories, but I imagine there's also some pitfalls. Are there certain mistakes that people go about doing their personal branding that we should talk about as well?
Yeah, I think what I see is, as I already mentioned, people wanting that immediate benefit without the effort. And we all want that across our life, right? Love to win a gold medal without having to train for a year or 5 years beforehand and all the rest of it. But I've not seen any shortcuts. It's about consistency, putting effort into what you're delivering. You can't write, if you're really lucky, can you write one blog and be seen worldwide for it, and then everything else comes to you?
It happens, not very normally, but it happens.
But it's the extreme, the lottery win, right? So, and you might want to be a spokesperson for your company, but are they going to give you it overnight? You've got to earn your stripes. So I get to speak for any business that I speak to the press, et cetera, but I didn't get that from day one when I was in the industry. It's because over time I volunteered to speak at events, and I've demonstrated and worked hard at it. So I stand up an event, hopefully there's a great audience interaction, good critiques, but it looks easy, but it's not. I strain over writing good content, testing myself of how would I feel in the audience? Would I be engaged, entertained? Would I learn something? Because I'm looking for that outcome of actually, he was a good speaker. You don't know who's in that audience. I want good people to comment or give good reference on that they use me again or referee me onto someone else. So it's hard work. Through doing it, you get a lot of opportunity. So I see people the other thing I see is people trying to fake it. If you don't know about something on social, you could fake it because you can look things up. You can socially engage with people. You can put stuff out and look like you know what you're talking about. But as soon as it enters the real world, you've just failed because you're going to quickly talk to someone and you don't know what you're talking about. It's not about regurgitating facts. It's about having your own opinion and being able to interpret what's going on and put your own content and opinion around it. You can't fake it. It will come back on you every single time. You've also got to control what you're seen as. So I think you mentioned being able to control your brand. It's about putting the right type of content out there and thinking about what you're doing. If you want to share personal stuff on Facebook, that's great, but set the settings so only your friends can see it. Think about what's getting indexed, what's getting seen on the internet.
Yeah, the way it was described to me is that there are three people. There is you today, who you actually are, how you're perceived today, and who you want to be in the future. And what you need to do is not only be different, but have people see that you're different. So, for example, stop maybe the social media posting. Stop on Instagram about your family, about your dog, about your coffee. And if you want to be, I don't know, a financial expert on board, someone who can run an audit committee, that should be the only stuff that you post about for several months so that people begin to change their mindset of like, oh, you're becoming someone else. Because even if you acquire a new skill set, they're not going to think of you in that new skill set immediately. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think you've got to get the mix right. So a guide I give to people, and it's not mandated, is the 4-1-1 rule. And that's, think about, if you're going to post information, post 4 pieces of information that are useful to your audience. They're informative. It might be a new study you've seen. It doesn't have to be your own content, but it's relevant to what you want to be known for, because that's who your audience should be. So if my audience is mostly around the cloud sector, I'm posting stuff and news around cloud, whether it's content I've created or content I've curated and I've noted from other sites and I've shared. So 4 pieces of, here's something that will be interesting to you as my audience. Consider then you can post something a bit lighthearted or personal. Okay. And then 1 promotional. So it's fine to put something out. I'm speaking at this event, or we've just launched this sort of thing. But if you inundate them with that and it's constant, a stream, you switch people off. So a good mix is, here's 4 bits of value to you. Here's something that's a bit more lighthearted or personal. Gives me some personality in the mix. And there's something that, absolutely is promotional, but you'll live with it. It's a bit like TV, right? If everything was adverts, US has gone that way a little bit, I guess. But if it was more advert than content of program, where do you go?
I found that on social, or let's just call it the internet in general, there is a thin red line that you do not want to cross. You've seen people who have crossed it and they're very promotional, very much pushing it, and you turn them out.
Yep.
You just don't want to hear from it anymore. So you're almost buying credibility with them to say, oh, okay, I get it. Yes, you have a business. This is your expertise. That makes sense. They're coming for the value add. But also, I think your 411 is really interesting because people want to peek behind the curtain. That's what social is about. It is social media. Yeah. So knowing a bit about your family or your dog or whatever it might be is probably really helpful.
There's nothing wrong with being you, right? You are a human being that at some point, a lot of social interactions I have found turn into a real world interaction. I have met a lot of major book authors in the sales sphere, a lot of cloud leaders globally started on social. I followed them or they followed me, and we shared each other's content, liked it, maybe commented. And then at some point down the line, we've ended up meeting in the real world, either by accident at an event, or one of us has reached out to the other one saying, I'm going to be in your country. Would it be handy to? And it's felt comfortable to meet. And when you met, often the conversation is, when did we first start? How did that? And you can't remember. And you go looking it up, right? Who followed who first, or who? You can't remember what instigated us, but it feels like you know each other because you've sort of engaged so much on social naturally that you've got an affinity. You sort of know a little bit about it. Feels like you know them. And that's a great segue into a real world relationship. And that's where social selling fits, right? Social selling isn't about selling and taking orders over the internet. It's about engaging with people using social media to find a common conversation that works its way into the real world down the line. That's all it is.
So that makes sense. And we've covered so much today in terms of helping people understand their branding. And I'm wondering about tools that we can guide our audience to. We've talked about social media in general. We've talked about LinkedIn quite a bit. Are there other specific tools or frameworks that you would recommend our audience?
I found some great tools along the way and found them by accident. So let's give you some hints and easy takeaways that your audience can take. So first one for your social photo is, how do you know it's a good one? So there's a website called photofeeler.com. And it's really where Facebook started. So it's really simple. You go on there and you can choose whether it's for personal use or business use. So you choose business if it's your LinkedIn profile, for example, and you rate other people. And it gives you 3 criteria, and you quickly see a photo. It's all you see. You don't know who they are, where they're from. And you just say, from this photo, do they look credible? Do they look this? Yes. And it's a really quick click, 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 click. You build up points by doing that. And you then use those points against your own photo. Excuse me. So you can upload your own photo and say, okay, this unknown, unwashed world out there, tell me what you think. Do I look credible? So I tested this. And when I present on social selling, I show, here's the photo I used originally. And it's me, not the one I use today. I'll tell you one in 10 seconds. So it was me done as a nice press shot for a company I worked for with no glasses on. And it got quite a good rating, I thought. So I used that photo. I then twigged a little bit later, actually, just out of curiosity, I'll test same photo with glasses on. Same photo. And the result was I was far more trustworthy. It went up something like 62% to 90%.
Wow.
I forget the exact numbers. Yeah, but it was humorous. So when I show this at events on a slide, people always laugh. Really? I said, tell me the difference in that photo. I've got glasses on. But do you know what? Have a look at the photo I always use on social now. It's with glasses. Right. Because first impressions count. Don't make the decision yourself. Don't ask friends and family. Test your photo. It's for free. And the one that gets the best results of those criteria on there that says, hey, look, you look the most professional, credible, etc., use that photo.
That's
It's not rocket science. So there's one easy one. Another one, if you really want to test how you look on the internet and you start getting into this, is brandyourself.com. I'm still playing with this. I'm new to this. So it's a website. You get a little bit free and then you have to pay. But what it does is looks at all your social profiles, looks at all your posts historically as well, and looks for any that might be considered borderline, i.e. could be seen as politically incorrect or have a word in it you didn't spot or didn't think of how that might be viewed. So it basically warns you of, here's your brand, here's how you look on Google, here's all the searches we found of you. So it looks at your brand and highlights the good and the bad for you to do something about. And another good one I'd say to people, which is a little trick I say, is that there's a website called Fiverr.com, Fiverr.com, and it's like the eBay of people with expertise in Photoshop, animation, etc. So if you look at my social feeds, often you'll see a graphic or a video or an animation that I've had done on there that gives me a piece of video, a piece of graphical content to go along with a blog or a social post that is personal to me. You won't have seen it somewhere else because I had it created. But the beautiful thing about Fiverr.com is each piece of work starts at $5. So you can get someone to create a wondrous animated GIF of some particularly celebratory thing, or to represent a blog you've done really cheaply, rather than spending days trying to figure it out yourself using tools, Photoshop or online products. I use it so much to create rich, good, professional looking. And the flattering thing is I've had people reach out to me, go, wow, how did you do that? Other people in social, and including marketing people. So I've recommended a lot of people to Fiverr.com because it's a fantastic marketplace for people with great skills around the world.
Well, those are wonderful tips. So that's fantastic takeaways. I will make sure we put those in the show notes. And Ian, I am just amazed by how quickly this time has gone by. We could probably talk about personal branding for the next 5 episodes. This is just a wonderful topic that will help all of us as we're going forward. Good. And I'm sure there'll be people who are wanting to follow up with you, whether it's to talk about your expertise or your personal branding skill set or the selling. And what would be the best way for people to follow up with you?
So there's another tip for them, I guess. I mentioned it earlier. So you can find me on LinkedIn. Go to ianmoyse.co.uk. And on Twitter, go to ianmoyse.cloud. So literally there, I've got 2 domains that cost me, I don't know, $15 a year to host them. And I've just mapped them to my Twitter and LinkedIn account. So right now, I don't have to start saying, go and search on Twitter for me. I've made it easy for the audience to find me. And those are the links I use in blogs and posts that therefore improve the SEO of that link.
Another great tip. Wonderful. Well, Ian, we were delighted to have you on the show today, and thank you so much for sharing your insights, your top tips, and helping all of us to be more boardroom bound.
Alexander, thank you.
That's it for this episode of Boardroom Bound. I really enjoyed chatting with Ian Moyse. He's got a fantastic example about how he used personal branding to build up his own reputation, his own system of information that now the world comes to him to collect, where he is a specific expert on it. And he walked us through that journey in a way that helped all of us realize here are some of the things we should all do, here are the mistakes we should avoid. And he also gave us a huge amount of tools, some wonderful websites that are simple that we can all use just to test out some of the basic information to get us rolling as we move towards that position of authority so that people are coming to us. And remember, if the goal for all of us is to be on a board, we need to have that niche, that area of expertise that people are seeking us out for. Ian clearly has that, but he gave an example about how we could all do that for ourselves. Now remember to head over to podcast.gordon.edu where you can get links to all of the resources we talked about to that today. For example, all of the great websites that he referred over to us. I'll have links for you there. Now, if you enjoyed this episode, I'd ask you to take 30 seconds to leave a review on iTunes. These reviews are one of the best ways we get out word about this podcast. Thanks for joining me on this episode of the show, and I can't wait to share more stories and strategies from brilliant business minds with you again next week. Remember to keep tuning in to be boardroom bound.